Yeah, good morning, everyone. So, last session we learned about services, right? What is a service and how to use them. So, we created our own service and we learned how to manage the service. Service uses a dependency injection mechanism. Service is controlled by two components. What are those? We have a provider, another one injector. Injector. What is the role of provider? Provider locates the service in memory and injector injects the service into the component. And what are the provider locations? Here one important question. So what are the various provider locations for service? What are the various provider locations for service? Remembered? Three locations will be there. One is root, another one child, another one is root, another one is platform, another one is any. For provider, three options are there: root, platform, and any. So provider, three locations will be there. When you are creating a service, this is the service we created, some capture. Now this is the provider locations. What are the provider locations we have? Three locations. We can define provided as what? Root, any, or platform. What is the difference? Root indicates that root refers to the memory of current application. Platform refers to specific module we call as module. That module I will show in the next concept. And any means it can be accessible from any project, right? So that is the difference actually. Here root refers to current application level. Application level refers to current application level. And platform refers to current module level. And any actually it refers to workspace level. Workspace level means it is a collection of projects now. You can access from any another project from any another workspace also. These are the three basic things for a service. So we have a root level, platform level, and any. Now here another question is where to configure the provider. So two locations are there. Where to configure the provider? You can configure at service level. Another one you can configure at module level, application module level. Two options are there. Service level, what we do? Syntax. Service level means what? We have to use injectable. In the injectable, we have to use an option. What is that option? Provided in we have to define root. You can define root, or you can define any, or you can define platform. Like this you can do. This is service level. In the injectable, you have to configure the provider. Another syntax is where you can define, we can define at module level, app.module.ts. Here we have providers. It's a array. In that array, you have to define the service name. Which service you have to use, you can use service name. If there are many services, all the services are separated with a comma. The services are separated with comma. At different service level, we configure. So, because in interviews, lot of questions are asked related to services and all, you need to know some answers, questions. What is provider? What is injector? What is the scope of provider? Where you can configure the provider. So these are important. Now, if anybody asks another question, if anyone asks you the question like, what is difference between provider configured in service level, configured at service level, and at module level? What is difference? What is difference? Module level, what is advantage? Service level, what is advantage? Module level is eager loading. Service level is lazy loading. Lazy loading means it is loaded only when it is required. Only when it is required. But at module level, it loads and it is ready even if it is not in use. Right? So that means module level is eager loading. And service level is lazy loading. That's what it happens. Huh? So eager loading, lazy loading, that is. Now, next important is, these are all technical points you need to understand. And one more question which already I given as point, what is difference between a factory and service? What is difference between a factory and service? Factory is a collection of functions and values, and factory uses single call mechanism, and service uses singleton mechanism. So factory uses single call mechanism, single call, where an object is created every time when a function is requested. Service uses, it uses a singleton pattern where object is created for first request, and the same object is used across requests. So that is what actually singleton is. So service uses a singleton pattern and factory uses a single call pattern. Actually, service is a collection of factories. It is built with a set of factories. Right. Next important Another point is another important concept. These all points we already discussed, but as a question I'm giving here separately, right? These all we discussed and learned before starting the concept of service. I explained this. Right. Some important questions are this, and others I already explained how to add a service, how to configure the injectors and all, right? Now let's see how to use built-in services. Means Angular, I showed you a service we created. We created a service and we are using. Angular has built-in services. One more question here is, because when you are using services built-in or anything, so in many interviews they ask like, why to inject a service reference in constructor and not to create an object for service class. Why to inject a service reference in constructor and not to create an object for service class? This is very commonly asked in interviews. They ask like, why you write service in constructor as a reference? Why don't you create an object? Because service is a class and service contains methods. How to access the methods of a class? Anywhere we have to create an object and access. But how you used the service? How you used the service? Suppose I want this service, capture service in this login. Then what we done into the constructor, we injected the service reference and we used it. Why? Why can't we create an object for that? For example, here, so if I say let some obj is equal to new capture service. Capture service is an object. And code, what is that code? Here we are defining obj dot generate code. Why you are not doing like this? Why you are not creating an object for that and you are accessing? Why you are injecting into the constructor? That is what actually single call and singleton is. If you create an object, what happens? In order to access this method, every time it have to create an object, allocate memory. But if you define in constructor, that means you are using singleton. Singleton means what? At the time of creating object for this particular login component, your service is injected into it. And it can be used until that component is live. So once the component is destroyed, then the memory is destroyed. You don't need to allocate memory every time. So that is the reason we directly inject into that, right? So the point is simple. Why we are not creating an object? Why we are injecting? Just to enable here to implement singleton. To implement singleton. Because service is designed with a singleton mechanism, and to implement singleton, we have to do that. That means what we do in the constructor, we have to define private and some reference, and we have to give the service name. That's how we do. And one more, I told you why we need an access modifier for that. Why we need an access modifier for reference, public, private. It is a parameter. Na? Why you need a access modifier for parameter? Generally, method parameters doesn't require access modifier. By giving an access modifier to the parameter, you are making the parameter at class level. Generally, the parameters are method level or function level. You are by giving access modifiers, you are making them class level. That means you can access from any location inside the class. Otherwise, they are accessible only at the function. Inside the function only parameter is accessible. But if you want to make it accessible outside, so why to define an access modifier for parameter in method in constructor method? Why to define an access modifier for parameter in constructor method? Answer for this is to configure the parameter at a class level so that it is accessible to all methods in class. Otherwise, it is not accessible to all methods in class. It is accessible only where you configure. And many times people ask, like, can I use public, private, any another access modifier? You can. So why we are giving private? So that it will be only within the class. That is the reason. So these are all very important questions, because majority of Angular interviews, lot of questions are asked on services, pipes, and concepts like component lifecycle. That means you must be perfect in component lifecycle hooks. In which hook, what activities performed. You need to know what is change detection, what is content projection, and you need to be strong in pipes and services. How to handle the pipes and service. Okay. Next important is, now we will see how to use a HTTP client service. HTTP client service. Actually, as I told you that Angular have built in some services, you can use those services for different purpose. What is the purpose of HTTP client services? So it provides a set of functions. It provides a set of functions that are responsible for handling interactions, with API. To handle interactions with the API, whatever the methods are required, it will provide. Actually, earlier, how we done that? We done that by using fetch. By using fetch, we are fetching the data from an API. So that means what is advantage is here, the important question is, what is difference? What is difference between fetch and HTTP client? This is a very important point, because generally JavaScript based technologies, they can use fetch for that. To communicate with API, get the data from API, interact with the data from API, we actually use fetch. JavaScript provides a promise called fetch. Then why you need HTTP client? What is the advantage of HTTP client. So point is nothing but actually there are a lot of differences. Difference between fetch and HTTP client. Actually, the key differences between HTTP client and fetch is it returns data in binary. It returns the data in binary form. So that binary data we need to convert. That means we need to parse. So parsing of data is required. Here HTTP client returns HTTP client returns in JSON. It returns in JSON format. So no parsing required. That means here no parsing required. There is no parsing required. And very important is fetch is not safe. So it is less secured fetch because anything in computer technologies by binary form handling means not secured. Any binary handling is not secured because anything is handled in a binary form, it will be blocked by browsers. Browsers will block the information if it is coming in a binary form and it is trying to convert the binary into normal object. So that is the reason. So fetch is not safe. And HTTP client is secured. It is secured. It have more security features when compared to fetch. Another problem with fetch here is generally fetch is also having an issue. It is poor in error handling. And HTTP have a good error handling features. So it can easily track the problem and identify where the problem occurred. It can identify. Actually, so fetch generally it is in a sync technique. And HTTP client, it uses async. That is one good advantage. Sync uses a blocking mechanism. When it is fetching the data from any location, it will block all other activities performed. But what is advantage of HTTP client is it uses asynchronous techniques. Asynchronous techniques means while it is fetching or submitting data to server, it can do that in the background. It will not block other tasks. It can do along with other tasks. But what is fetch is when fetch is doing, other tasks are blocked. Fetch will perform the task. After that, other tasks are released. But this actually HTTP client uses async by using RxJS. So it uses a concept called RxJS. By using that RxJS, it can manage asynchronous methods. Actually, RxJS is a JavaScript asynchronous library. It is a JavaScript library to create asynchronous requests. And this library is inbuilt provided in Angular. It is not a part of Angular. It is a separate library. It is provided in Angular to handle requests in asynchronous way. Any JavaScript technology can use RxJS. RxJS is a separate library. You can import in any JavaScript technology to create asynchronous requests. But what is advantage of Angular is it is inbuilt coming with RxJS. That is the reason sometimes people are confused because they don't know the architecture. They think that RxJS is a part of Angular. RxJS is not a part of Angular. It is a separate library. And this library is inbuilt available in Angular. Not only Angular, any JavaScript technology can use that RxJS, right? So HTTP uses this RxJS actually. For example, RxJS. So this is RxJS separate library. This is RxJS. So this is reactive extensions library for JavaScript. It is not for Angular or React. It is for every JavaScript based application. What is specialty is Angular is internally having it. And its current latest version is 7. It is very recently released. And you can see how to use it, how to handle it, everything it will do. And what is the main purpose? More consistent APIs. More consistent APIs. That means the main intention is it can provide better features, especially while interacting with APIs and performing the tasks asynchronously. To create asynchronous tasks manually is a lengthy process, and using RxJS will make it simple. So especially when you are working with APIs and all, we use this. What is API doing? Connecting with server, fetching the data from server, connecting to server, sending data to server. And while it is doing the task, all other tasks are blocked. So we don't want like that. So in the background, this will be performed without blocking other tasks. In that case, we have to take help of RxJS. We'll see how, right? So this is the basic difference between fetch and JSON, fetch and HTTP client. Now let's see how to use this client. And remember, I told you that HTTP client is a service. How to use a service? To use a service, you have to inject that service. That means, so first step is you have to, that means step 1. So import the service from library. You have to import the service from library. Actually, we have to import. So we have to import HTTP client from. So it will be in a library called Angular, say common. It is Angular common HTTP library actually. In Angular common HTTP, there are two. One is HTTP client class. It is actually. We also have a module. HTTP client module. HTTP client module. You know, module is defined where? Module is defined in app module. Angular / common / HTTP. So this is from where you have to handle it. So you have to import the library. Actually, module need to be imported. Process I will show you. So first step, what we do, go to the project. In this project, go to app module. In the app module, you have to import HTTP client module. From where? First we will import from @ Angular common / what? HTTP. From here we have to import HTTP client module. That is the module you have to import. and you need to configure that here. So here we need to define HTTP client module. That is ready. This is defined in app module. And what is this one? This is class. That means what you do here. This is in which location we do it. It is in component. In component, we do this. Where we do this? This is in app module. In app module, we do this. Second one is in app module. Okay. So this is in app module and this is in component. This you have to do in app module. This you have to do in component. Now, once you import the service library, now step two is inject the library into any component. You know how to inject the library into any component. Remember, this is a service library. This is a service library. How to inject a service into any component? Into constructor. Into constructor, we have to give private HTTP. It is HTTP client. That is how we need to import. Now, what you can do by using HTTP client, you can access. That means simply, generally, what we do is next step 3. Step 3 is access by using HTTP methods. By using HTTP methods. What are the HTTP methods you have? This dot HTTP dot, we have get method. We have this dot HTTP dot post method. Like this we can. What is the purpose of get method? It will fetch the data from API. Post method is for submitting data to API. We can get data from API by using get, submit data by using post, right? For post, you need some server-side technology to handle. I will show you one point, but initially we will see how to handle the get request, right? How do we manage? So now no need to use fetch anymore. Instead of using fetch in Angular, you better use HTTP client. So this have more features when compared to the client fetch. So let's see here how to use it. So I will go to the project. In this project, first step is we will add a service. We will add a service into services folder. Into the services folder, we will add a service. We can add through command or we can add manually. Manually, I am adding data.service.ts. It is data service TS. I say fake store service. Okay. Fake store dot service dot ts. Okay. Now how to define it as a service? For that, what we have to do, import. What we have to import? Injectable from Angular core. From Angular core, we have to import. We have to import injectable. We have to import that injectable. And we need to configure export class, that is fake store service. And how to define it as a service at the net injectable. And it uses a provider provided in, right? It uses a provider. Yeah. provided in which level? Root. That is how we are configuring. This is the injectable defined. That is a general service. You can add through command ng generate service. Now in this service, we will configure a constructor. And here we have to inject HTTP client. That means what we do? So we have to import HTTP client from which location? Angular / common / what? HTTP. From Angular common HTTP, we have to import the client. This is a class. We have to inject this into constructor. So private, what is it? HTTP. It is of what type? HTTP client. Now here we will create a method called public get products is a method. What this get products method have to do? It should return all the products. It should return all the products coming from API. So you don't need fetch now. What to do? It should return this dot HTTP dot get. Get from which URL? Just URL. URL is http :/ what? fakestore-api.com / what? Products. That's it. That's it. That means it is going to fetch the data from that API and return. You don't need fetch. You don't need then response JSON, because in fetch data comes in a binary. Convert that into JSON. Then that JSON must be stored. Here simple HTTP get. It is going to fetch the data from that URL. But one problem is here. The problem is when you are using this service is going to block other requests in the application. That means when this method is executing, it will not allow any another method to run in the background. That is not good. That means when this method is running, it will not allow another method to run in the background. So after this method is finished, next method will run. That is by default, it is synchronous. Now how to make it asynchronous? How to make this method as asynchronous method? To make the method as asynchronous, we have to make this as asynchronous method. To make the method asynchronous, we need help of a library called RxJS. Okay, let's use it. We need a library called RxJS. And important is generally in this RxJS library. So we have two important components. We have observable. And we have subscriber. Observable and subscriber. Where you heard these two words earlier?
This meeting is being recorded.
Sender, subscriber, observable. These are very common words. People who don't know proper JavaScript and all, they feel like these are all new topics they are learning in Angular, right? That is the reason sometimes people even directly ask like, sir, will you teach RxJS in Angular? It's not a question at all, right? Without RxJS, asynchronous cannot happen, and it's a general concept. It is not a special topic that somebody teaches you and you learn, because in the modern applications you need asynchronous, and it is a part of general programming. It is not a specialized concept to learn separately. It is a part of general modern programming in the current generation. So these are very common words actually: observable, subscribers. Now, what is the purpose of these two components in RxJS is observable defines it specifies which method should be executed, which method to be executed asynchronously. That method will be loaded into memory. Which method you need to execute asynchronously, that method is configured by using what? Observe. Now, which method should execute asynchronously? This method should execute asynchronously. Na? So the method which need to be executed asynchronously, that is configured by using what? Observable. Observable defines the method which need to execute asynchronously. That means now this method and subscriber is going to tell when to execute this method. It will execute the method. Execution of method is done by subscriber. Configuration of method is done by observer. Observer will configure the method and subscriber will execute the method. Subscriber is going to execute the method, and this is going to configure. It defines that the method is an asynchronous. That means now you need one here. We need to import. We need to import from which library? We have to import from RxJS library. It is not a part of Angular, but it is installed along with Angular. Angular installs this library also for you, but it doesn't belong to Angular. This RxJS, you see, package JSON file. In package JSON, where is RxJS? Its 7 version is currently. RxJS is 7, Angular is 15. Nah? It's not belonging to Angular. Bootstrap icons, TypeScript, RxJS. These doesn't belong to Angular, but they are used in Angular. When they are used in Angular, it is not Angular version. They are having a separate version. So now here, what to import? We have to import observable. And we need to make this. We need to make this method as type. You learned generic types, na? It should be of type, method type as observable. That means we need to configure the type as observable. Observable is a generic type. It is a generic type. You need to configure a generic type. Generic type, currently I defined any type. I'm configuring any type. That means actually how you do method return type you learned na. This is method. What is the return type? Observable. And what is the observable type? Any type. Because we are not sure what type of data will come. But you know the URL na? This URL is going to return what type of data? This URL, current URL, fake store API URL is going to return what type of data? Products. That is going to return an array of objects. You saw that, no? Right? What is that URL going to return? Fake store API.com what? Products. It is returning array of products, no? right? That means this is not one type, it is array type. Array type, you can make it strongly typed also. Instead of any type, you can strictly tell what type. What type? We have fake store contract. Na? Where is that? Fake store product contract type. Understood? It is fake store product contract type. You have to import that fake store product contract. It is of fake store product contract type. That means when you are defining an observable, you have to tell it will execute asynchronously and return what type. Is it returning an object? Is it returning an array? If it is an array, what type array? You can configure that. That means now you can write like this. Okay, now see why it is showing error. It is showing error because it is expecting return type as the fake store product array. In that case, this get also return same. That means this get also is a generic type. And it should be what type returning? Fake store product contract array type. That is how we need to configure. That means what type is the return of function. The same type, the return of data also should be there. That means function return type must match with the return type of the. That means now why? So remember, without this also it works. By why we need this? Because without this, if you define any service method, what will happen? That service method is going to stop all other methods and execute only this. We don't want like that. We want to happen in an asynchronous way. In that case, we need this library called RxJS. Okay, now service is ready. In that service, a method is ready. Now this method is returning all products. Okay, we will create another method. Public. A service can contain any number of methods. In one service, there can be several methods. I want another service for get categories. And it is also what type? Observable type. It should return what type? It is not fake store. It is a string type array. All categories are string type array now. So we will create a simple string type array. Understood? That means now what we have to do? Return this dot http dot get from get what type? String type array. From which location? So http colon fake store API .com / products / what categories. That is how we need to define. These are two service methods. A single service can contain any number of methods, and we need to configure the methods by using this asynchronous approach. So here, one of the key point you need to know here is RxJS. This is important, especially while working with these APIs. This is RxJS. So what is the purpose? You can see the definition I will give you. You can see it says a library for composing what? Composing asynchronous and event-based programs using observable sequence. That is what actually, whenever we talk about events asynchronous, the word observer comes. It uses a pattern called observer, right? So it is reactive extensions library for JavaScript. So RxJS reactive reactive extensions library for JavaScript. So it is used to create asynchronous. It is used to create asynchronous asynchronous events using observables. It is used to create asynchronous events using observables. That means asynchronous means what? Asynchronous uses unblocking technique. Asynchronous uses unblocking technique which executes the events without blocking other requests. That is the main concept here. Here, two components are required. RxJS provides various components. So one is observable, another one is subscriber. What is the purpose? Observable configures asynchronous event. Subscriber executes the asynchronous event. Asynchronous event is executed by subscriber. We have to do that. So while creating the service requests, you need to do this. So we need an observable, we need a subscriber. Now we created a service called fake store data, and that service is ready because we mentioned provided in root. It is also ready. We can use anywhere we want. That means now, for example, here we want to access the data and present the data. Earlier, what we have done, we have to use a lot of fetch methods. By using fetch methods, we need to handle. Now, you see, because a service is already created, how it is easy now, let's check. I will access localhost. Currently, some page is running. Let's go to our project and observe here. Suppose we have shopper template. In this shopper template, you see a lot of fetch method is used now. So many times fetch. One for loading categories, another for loading products, another for loading the product based on specific ID. Every time we need fetch. Now see what is advantage here is, let's create similar here. I will add a new component. Yeah. So I will add a new component. Let's add ng generate component. Suppose I will give the name as service demo. Skip test. I'm adding a component called service demo. Now in this, I will keep it in the startup. in app module, the service demo component is in startup. In index, I will give service demo. So service demo component is ready. Service demo. Okay. Now, once it is done, let's check here. Is it working fine? Service demo works fine. Now let's go to service demo component. In the service demo component, here we want to access the data. Here I want to access the data. So I'm implementing implements ng on init, and here we are defining. So we are on init. Okay. And here ng on init. We will write a constructor. And now here we will add a collection public. It is some categories. Categories is a string type array. String type array. Initially it is empty. We want to get all the categories from fake store. This time you don't need any fetch. You already created a service. And that service is having two methods. What is the service name? Fake store service. It is having two methods. One is get products, another one get categories. So we want to use them. Inject that service here. So private fake store. It is of what type? Fake store service type. Am I right? You have to import fake store service from services. Now it is fake store service type. Now you can simply use it here. So how to access? On initialization, this dot what? Fake store. In that you have get categories. This get categories, you see it is an observable now. And observable functions cannot execute directly. Observable functions cannot execute directly because they are asynchronous. Asynchronous methods are executed by subscribers. They are executed by subscribers. Ordinary methods are directly executed, but asynchronous methods are executed by a subscriber. That means you need a subscribe method. A subscribe method will come. This subscribe method is going to get the data coming. That means whatever data is returned by these categories, that data will come. So we will collect the data as a parameter. After collecting the data as parameter, we will apply that to categories. That means this dot what? Categories is equal to whatever the data is coming. That means whatever data is coming from this particular method, that data will be stored inside categories. And why you return like this? Because this will execute, fetch the data without blocking other requests. Without blocking other requests. Suppose you written like this dot categories is equal to this dot fake store dot get categories. Now it is showing error. Why it is showing error? Because it is also returning a string only. This is also string array only na. It is also string array. This is also string array. But this is asynchronous string array. Asynchronous string array means what? It is not fetching in a blocking technique. It is fetching using an unblock. It is fetching using an unblocking technique, which you cannot directly execute. Then you need help of which one? Subscribe. You have to do in this way. Now all the data is ready. You don't need to write any fetch now. Ready, data is ready, just present. Now data comes from these categories and it stores in this location. Similarly, you want products data also. Then what you have to do? Public. What is it? Products. Products is what type? Fake store contract type na? Contract type array. It is an empty. Now on initialization, again same concept. This dot what? Fake store. Fake store is service name. In that there is another method. What is it? Get products. This method should execute using subscribe. Collect the data and assign the data to this dot what? Products. Whatever data comes. Now this is also ready. This is how we need to interact with the APIs. Right, by using a HTTP client. Now the data is stored in categories and products. We have to print that. Let's see. Go to HTML page. In HTML page, I'm just giving here div class container fluid. And here we put a heading. So fake store API. And let's keep the class as text center. Okay, fine. Below this, I will put a drop down. In the drop down, I want to display all the categories. That means what we have to do, option, we have to use, what is it? NG for LET category of what is the collection categories. And we need to display the category. And all the categories information will be displayed here. And it is ready, same. This time we are fetching the data. So yeah, we are fetching the data. We are accessing the data from API without fetch. There is no fetch. We are using a general service. We are using a general service. What is advantage now is wherever you need to use fake store data, just you have to inject this service. Just you have to inject that service. Inject that service and use these methods. Get categories, another one, get products. Products data is also ready. Suppose I will put a horizontal line. Here I will create a table temporarily. You can display in a card style or anything. Hover and T head. I'm just using TR, TH. One is title. Another one is suppose preview. I want to display two details only. In the table body, we need to generate a row. So TR, this row should be repeated. NG for LET item of collection. Collection is what? Products. And in the first cell, we will display here item dot name. Not name, it is title. Another cell, we want the image. And so here SRC source item dot image and some width and height. Like this we define width and height. And you can see the data is there. Now the data will come for all the products here. This is all the data available. So we are fetching the data, accessing the data and displaying the data by using what? We are doing that by using a HTTP client service. HTTP client service. So the points I will give here, what we done, example I will give you. First step. So you have to go to app module, module.ts, and here we have to import. Which one to import in app module? HTTP client module. This you have to import. In imports, you will have this one. HTTP client module. Make sure that you imported this module into app module. Second step, go to services folder and add a new service. What is the service? I will just add it here as fake store dot service dot ts. In this, you need to import two things. One is HTTP client, another one observable. We need observable from RxJS. Huh? So I will copy this. This is fake store service. I will copy the code. That is how we have to import. That is fake store service. Injectable is required, HTTP client, observable, and a contract. This contract already we are having because we are dealing with fake store. Okay. Now we add another component. Add a new component, and the component name is service demo dot component dot ts. In this service demo component dot ts, we need to add all this logic. Copy that. And another one is service demo dot component dot html. Here the important is subscribe method. How to execute the observable and how to manage the observable is important, right? That is the subscribe method you need to define. I will show you here. See, this is example. Let's take the previous one. You see in our project already there is a startup. In the startup we will keep a shopper template component is there. I will use that in the startup. Shopper template component. I will keep in this for a template. So actually shopper template we designed like this. Remember that? And here we used fetch for fetching the data. We use fetching these details, displaying and all. Observe carefully the code. So shopper template. This is shopper template. Yeah. In this shopper template TS file, you see load products is there. There is a method called load products, which is loading all the products. There is another method called what? And now you don't need to do all these things. Suppose I want to now the what is it? Store service. We have to inject fake store service. Just inject the fake store service. After injecting the fake store service, let's go to init. On init, what to do? This dot what? Fake store dot what? Get categories. On that which method? Subscribe, collect the data, and this dot what? Categories is equal to whatever the data. That's it. That's it. That means the categories data will come and display, and you can see here, refresh, and that is some problem. On initialization, this dot categories data subscribe method. In the constructor, acha, this is fake store service only now. Let's check where the problem occurred. Some problem is there in console. In console, problem is not the data is coming, huh? It is taking time. Okay. The data is here. Whatever data we have, it is coming. It is just taking some time to get the data and display. Okay. Right. So this is basically how the configuration for now. Everywhere you can simply remove that. Suppose I want load products. You don't need this anymore. What you have to do, just get the API method and use it. So you created a service you can use in any project now. You can use in any project, not only here. There is another project of Angular. There also you can import that service and use it. That is why we created a workspace now. In workspace, there can be several projects and you can access. Later, one more project, if you create, you can access this service and use. So you can inject service into any application and use it. That is the concept. This is very, very important. And this is what you do in real-time projects. You generally don't use fetch. We use HTTP client, right? You have to try this. Okay. Now, once you do this, now we will go into next concept. How do we work with Angular forms? Angular forms and services. Form services will be there. Forms and validation services will be there. Validation services. Already 70% forms we learned because we learned about MVC, MVVM approach. In that already forms we use, but in forms with validations, we have to learn how to deal validations. Two types of forms are there. What are those? How to deal with them? We will see. That we'll see in tomorrow's session. First, you practice this HTTP client. Tomorrow, after the session, I will take doubts. Right? Tomorrow, after the session, if we have any doubts, we will check and clarify the doubts. Okay. So first we will tomorrow start with forms. You practice the service. Any problem is there, tomorrow I will check. Okay.